If you have spent any amount of time listening to or reading marketing content, you have heard the same advice given over and over and over. And that is storytelling is one of the most powerful tools for communication. And it is. But there is one critical mistake that almost everyone is making and hardly anyone is talking about. And it is not messing up the story structure or even telling a boring story. The biggest mistake that you're making is telling one story to the market while your team is living a completely different one. And so in this video, I'm going to break down why your story must be sold internally before it is ever believed externally. And then we're going to go into how to fix the disconnect in your storytelling that is costing you the most valuable asset for your brand, and that is trust. My name is Angela Mina, and I'm a marketing consultant. I work primarily with companies that manufacture building materials. And if you happen to sell innovative or off-site manufactured products, I want you to listen carefully because the insights that I'm going to share in this video could actually skyrocket your sales if applied correctly. Let's talk about where this storytelling narrative is breaking down and why so many companies have great stories, but then they're not growing. And so the current teaching goes like this. Create an interesting story, create a great story. And because content is king, blast that story across channels. And then you will start to see engagement go up and you will start to see the sales roll in. And so the way a lot of companies are implementing this is that marketing will go and create the story. They will produce a lot of content and they will distribute this content across all of the channels they can possibly distribute it to. But then sales does not know that this story exists, and customer service is living a completely different life. They are way too deep into problem solving to even know what's going on upstairs. And let me just break this down in a scenario that I have personally witnessed in the building materials industry. There are so many companies right this minute that are selling a story of certainty in an uncertain industry. So they're telling their customers traditional construction is uncertain, it's chaotic, there's all of these weather delays, material prices are fluctuating, labor shortages, and cost overruns, and contractors are having trouble managing the schedule, chaos, chaos, chaos. And so because we're now manufacturing building materials, we're bringing relief, we're bringing calm, we're bringing predictability into the industry. That is the story that a lot of companies are selling. And so they blast this message across channels in their marketing, in their brochures, everywhere. They're telling this story of how they are going to bring order to the chaos, how they're going to bring relief to contractors and to builders and to developers. And so then they start to get the engagement and start to get the calls. But then here's what happens. Depending on what's going on at that time of the cycle or that time of the quarter, if sales is under pressure to close deals, they start to tell a completely different version of that story. And they start talking about comparisons and here's how our product performs better and here is how we are going to be cheaper in the long run than whatever else you were planning to use. And in fact, if you buy today, we're going to throw in a 15% discount. Completely different story. And so the customer goes, okay, so when can I expect delivery? And so now sales goes to start interfacing with either operations or customer service. And then they come back with another completely different story. Well, the factory is not running at capacity right now, so we can't really give you a precise delivery date. It's going to be maybe in 4 to 6 weeks, and we'll let you know. And so it starts to seem like every different department is living a completely different story. And so the customer starts to ask themselves, are these people even working for the same company? Do these people even know what they're doing? Does the left hand know what the right hand is doing? And this is where the narrative breaks down. And this is where you lose trust with customers, you lose trust with prospects, and they fall back to what they've always known. Either they're just going to go and use the traditional building materials that they've always used, or they're going to start comparing. They're going to start doing that side-by-side comparison, and then you fall back into price competition, which no one wants to be there. And I have unfortunately seen this happen so many times over and over with great companies that are selling fantastic products. But because their story is disjointed, they are losing customers. They are losing bids every single day. And so the critical mistake that this company is making is that they have a great story, but leadership is missing. When marketing creates a story in isolation, they're creating a story based on what they know will sell. And that is a good strategy. However, what they know will sell versus what the company can actually live are completely different things. Because if one message is able to sell and bring in leads, however, the sales department is not able to continue that story, they're not able to maintain that congruency, then you start to lose trust. And so how do we fix this? How do we create a story that can actually be maintained, that can actually have some consistency in all of the departments of the business and in all areas of the business? Now, I talked about leadership missing in this situation, and that is the first stop that should be made by the marketing department before they even start to distribute the story. The first stop should be to make sure that the CEO of the company and the company leadership is bought into the story in a way that they can actually demonstrate the values of that story, the principles of that story. So we talked about a lot of companies in the offsite manufacturing industry are talking about precision, are talking about reliability, are talking about measured and all of this very direct and very organized way of doing construction. There's no guesswork, there's no delays, there is no chaos. However, they are living the chaos in the factory. They are living the disconnection in their operations, in the way that they engage with the customer. The first thing that you want to do as a leader of a company like this is to make sure that whatever story you choose to tell, it can be lived by leadership, by sales, by marketing, by the operations department, by everyone in the company in some way or another. It does not have to be 100% accurate. It just has to be congruent. Congruency is what is going to continue that chain of action with the customer. They speak to one person and they hear the same story that they heard when they engaged with your content, and they speak to the next person and that story is continued. If you want to turn this around, you need to stop just telling the story and start becoming the story in the company, in your operations. One of the reasons why story is very powerful is that it casts a vision for the future. So it starts with a problem. It starts with the customer experiencing some kind of discomfort, and then you positioning your product as a solution for that discomfort and casting a vision for the future where the customer has either achieved something or they have gone through a transformation. That vision is what you want to maintain. If the story starts to break down, then that vision breaks down. And so what you want to do is to imagine a situation where your customer continues to live the story that they first experienced, that every step in their journey is leading them to that aspirational future that you have cast in their story, and that there is no disconnect along the way. You can't sell a story of relief from the chaos and then, on the other hand, continue to operate in chaos. You can't tell a story of precision and reliability, but then you can't even tell the customer when you expect for their goods to be delivered. That is disjointed storytelling. That is incongruency. And that is what is losing customers. If you choose to tell a story about reliability, then be reliable. Live that in every part of your business and in every interaction that the customer has. That consistency is what creates this psychological safety that allows your customer to see the value of your product and to continue to engage with your brand. And so you might be wondering, how? How do we create a story that we can actually live, that can actually perpetuate across all of the departments of the business and can actually be lived every single day by leadership, all the way from the CEO to the receptionist? Here's how. It starts with positioning. Of course, it starts with positioning. Like I've said on this channel so many different times, if your positioning is generic, your customers don't believe it. So many other people have said the exact same thing, and maybe they didn't even deliver. Or if they delivered something that was substandard. And so if you bunch yourself with everyone else by saying the same things everyone else is saying, we have good quality products, we've been around for 40 years, we have excellent customer service. All of those generic things do not make an interesting story and do not compel compel your customers to buy from you. The other mistake about having generic positioning is that it can be interpreted so many different ways. And so if we're creating a story around generic positioning, if we're creating a story around the fact that we have good quality products, how do you even interpret that into something that your team can live every single day? How do you interpret that into something that you can demonstrate to your customers, to your leadership, to all of the departments in your factory? When sales is under pressure to close deals, how do they translate the idea that we create quality products? It is difficult, and that's why it falls apart so easily. On the other hand, if you have strong positioning and you have a unique value proposition, your story becomes cultural DNA. It is something that you can very specifically apply to different areas of your business without losing your customer and without losing the congruency of the story that you're telling. For example, if you're going to pick customization as part of the story that you're telling, then you need to make sure that every part of your business is actually customizable, in the sense that if you're providing a service to your client, if you're dealing with a contractor or a builder and they're asking for certain measurements, then that needs to flow through every part of your business. The salespeople need to be flexible and be able to customize their either their quotes or their proposals to the customer that they're talking to. The same with the customer service department. If customization is what you sell and what you stand for, what kind of custom service can the customer service department provide to continue living that philosophy? The operations department, the leadership of your company, the story that you're selling needs to continue. And so these are things that need to be discussed within the company. If you have chosen, if the marketing department sat down and decided this is a story that we're going to run with, then everyone needs to run with that story in everything that they do that interfaces with the customer. And again, this can only be done if your positioning is specific. If your positioning is generic and you're still saying things like, we're going to modernize the industry, we're going to modernize your construction, there's no way to actually live that. There is no way to demonstrate that throughout your business. You have to work on truly unique positioning, and then you can translate that into a story. The positioning will come first, then the story, then the leadership of the story. I also want to call out the sustainability story in this industry because everyone is preaching it. Sustainability when it comes to materials, when it comes to energy consumption, when it comes to recycling, when it comes to carbon footprints. Everyone is preaching sustainability and drinking wine. A lot of companies are saying this because it sounds good and it's a truly emotionally connecting story that gets you sales. However, if you're not careful and if you break that story, you're going to break the trust of your customers and it's going to have the opposite effect. Because here's what happens. The marketing team tells this grand story about sustainability and the company's contribution towards lowering the carbon footprint. And then the customers come up with questions about, okay, if we're talking sustainability, what is the energy consumption of either the factory itself, or now we're factoring in distribution of the material, which costs energy. A lot of companies, and especially when it comes to off-site produced materials, talk about sustainability, but very few of them actually design it into their operations. And then the story crumbles as soon as a buyer starts asking questions about the cost of delivery. And when I'm talking about the cost, I mean the cost to the environment. There is energy consumption in the factory, energy consumption to deliver the goods, energy consumption for the cranes and all of the power tools that are required to actually install the product. All of this energy consumption is factored in when you start talking about sustainability. And if you can't answer these questions, or if you cannot build this sustainability into your entire system, you're actually eroding trust from your buyers. So I want you to think about this. When you come up with these narratives about sustainability and carbon footprint and the environment and energy consumption, I want you to actually think about how you are going to live these values within your operations and within the entire company. When customers ask questions about recycling, can you answer those questions with actual credible information? What are you recycling? How much of it are you recycling? What effect does it have on the environment? If you're going to tell a story about sustainability, it needs to be a real story and a credible story and a true story. Your customers do not buy what you're telling them. They buy the story that they're actually living when they experience your brand. They will buy what they can actually see versus what they're being told. And so stop asking your marketing department, what story can we tell so we can sell more products? The question you need to be asking is, what story can we become? Because the companies that actually grow and create a business that is sustainable and profitable are the companies that don't just tell a story. They're the companies that actually live the story, invite the customer into the story, and the customer experiences that story and the outcome or the aspirational future that they have been promised. All right, that is all for today, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.